I'm Dr. Judy Malinek. I'm a board-certified forensic pathologist, and I just watched the Nolan Wells press conference, and I wanted to share some context for everyone. Being able to definitively state the cause of death after a body has not been found for several days.
If you watch this entire breakdown and still walk away without committing to see this through, ask yourself what that says about how much you really care about justice. Because for the first time since this case began, the most important witness finally spoke. Not through a family member, not through a filtered statement, face-to-face, mother to young woman. And what she said did not match the version of events that had been circulating for weeks. The FBI has now officially addressed its role in this investigation. The details are not what many people expected. New dispatch audio and GPS data reconstruct the boat's movements minute by minute on July 4th, and a mother who buried her son is still waiting for answers that haven't come. Tonight we separate what's confirmed from what's claimed, what the evidence actually shows from what the public has been told, and why the story of Nolan Wells keeps changing before the grand jury has even seen the evidence. Let's start with who Nolan Wells actually was. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old, a senior football player at Ocean Springs High School, remembered by the people who knew him for an easy smile and a quiet steadiness. The kind of young man who made you feel like you mattered just by being in his orbit. In February 2025, he signed to play football at Southwest Mississippi Community College in Pike County. The day he signed, he said something that now hits differently. Truly a blessing, just being here with like some of my best friends, teammates, and we're all going to college together, most of us. So it's just truly a blessing here. That was him. That was Nolan, looking forward, planning a future, surrounded by people he loved. Less than 18 months later, he was gone. On July 4th, Nolan joined a group of friends on a boat headed for Horn Island, a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, uninhabited, federally protected land, accessible only by boat. Every summer it draws crowds of holiday revelers. That weekend it was packed. Nolan was last seen alive sometime around 3 in the afternoon on the island's northwestern tip. At some point after that, his friends made the trip back to the mainland. Nolan did not go with them. His phone stayed behind too, left with the group as they returned home. That night, when Nolan still hadn't turned up, his mother reported him missing. A multi-agency search followed. Coast Guard, Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, National Park Service, United Cajun Navy. For 2 days there was no sign of him. Then on July 6th, the park ranger found his body along the shoreline just off Horn Island. Dental records later confirmed his identity. What started as a local search off a small barrier island has since become a story followed nationwide, drawing news crews and millions of strangers into one family's worst nightmare. If you've made it this far, you've already invested something in this story. You've heard Nolan's name, you've felt the weight of what his family has been through, and that means you have a choice to make. The world looked away from cases like this for decades. Don't look away now. Every person who subscribes is a witness, and witnesses are what the dead deserve. Let's talk about what the FBI actually said. When the FBI's name entered this case publicly, speculation moved faster than facts. Some people read federal involvement as proof the case had been secretly escalated into something far more serious than local authorities were admitting. Others rate it as the opposite, federal agents stepping in to manage the narrative rather than investigate the death. The FBI's Jackson Field office eventually addressed both readings directly, releasing a full public statement that was deliberate in its tone and precise in what it confirmed. The statement said the agency has been supporting the Jackson County Sheriff's Office from the beginning, using federal tools and partnerships, that the Sheriff's Office leads this investigation and will continue to lead it, and that the FBI's specific focus has been on interstate threats directed at individuals connected to the case. Sheriff John Ledbetter separately confirmed the FBI is also assisting with digital evidence examination, a role he described as not unusual given that Horn Island sits on federal land and the two agencies have an established working relationship. That word threats is where this section of the story becomes something beyond the investigation into Nolan's death. The only way stories like this continue to be told is if people like you choose to care, choose to stay, choose to be part of the community that won't let go. While Christine and Elmore Wansley were in the process of planning their 18-year-old son's funeral, anonymous hate mail arrived targeting their legal team. It came while they were choosing a church and writing a eulogy. Traston Shepard stated publicly that he and others connected to the case had been receiving online threats since the story drew national attention. Warren Hudson said the volume and nature of the threats directed at him were severe enough that he made the decision not to attend Nolan's funeral at all. Judge Ashley Cole, whose stepson Warren was on the boat with Nolan that day, stated publicly that she and her family had received a wave of death threats on July 30th. Those threats produced the first concrete criminal accountability in this entire story, though not in the way most people following the case expected. A California man was arrested for allegedly sending death threats directly to Judge Ashley Cole. The messages targeted Cole and members of her family, included images of her children. Investigators traced the social media account responsible through a combination of email, IP addresses, date of birth, phone number, and street address cross-referencing. The suspect was identified and taken into custody. That arrest is the first time anyone connected to the public hysteria surrounding this case has faced legal consequences for their actions. Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Fitch released a public statement making the state's position clear. Anyone who threatens or attempts to intimidate investigators, prosecutors, or witnesses connected to this case will be held accountable under the law. Mississippi Department of Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tindell went further, stating directly that online misinformation has been the accelerant behind the threats, and that both state and federal law enforcement are actively monitoring and responding to the situation. Ben Crump addressed this without equivocation. No one's life should be threatened in the pursuit of truth, and no one should be treated as guilty before evidence establishes it. That principle, Crump made clear, applies to every name connected to this case on every side of it without exception. Now let's talk about the timeline, the real timeline, the one the GPS recorded. At almost exactly the same hour Nolan was last seen alive, something went wrong on the boat. Someone aboard placed a call for towing assistance. Dispatch audio from that call was later obtained through a public records request. What it confirms is not in dispute by anyone. The bilge pump, the mechanical system responsible for keeping water from accumulating inside the hull, had failed. The vessel was taking on water. The group needed help getting back to the mainland. That audio was recorded in real time on the afternoon of July 4th, hours before anyone on Earth knew that Nolan Wells would not be coming home. It cannot be a fabrication after the fact. It is an independent piece of evidence that exists entirely outside of anyone's memory of that afternoon. Warren Hudson, one of the friends aboard that boat, later sat down with the Officer Tatum podcast and spoke publicly about what happened next. Warren is the stepson of Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, a detail that becomes relevant later in this case. His account of that afternoon is that the group was dealing with a genuine emergency. He said they did ask Nolan about leaving, and that Nolan made the decision to stay on the island with the girl he had met, intending to get a ride back to the mainland later on a different boat. That is Warren Hudson's account. It is presented here as exactly that, his stated version of events. GPS records show the boat departed Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. That matches almost exactly the timeline that Judge Ashley Cole had already described in an earlier public statement. Before the GPS data was released, before anyone could accuse her of aligning her version to fit the records. The boat did not go straight home. It returned to its original departure dock at 5:44 p.m., having been towed at reduced speed for a stretch before picking back up. From there, the GPS data shows it moved into Fort Bayou at 5:52 p.m., returned to the dock at 6:06 p.m., then traveled to the Fort Bayou boat launch at 7:19 p.m., where it was presumably towed by vehicle to a private residence. Nolan was not on it. The group did not call Christine when they got back. By every account available, that was not because anyone was trying to hide something. It was because this trip had been done before. Nolan was 18. An evening without a phone call on a holiday weekend was not yet a reason for alarm. That calculation changed just after 11 p.m., when one of Nolan's friends called Christine directly. She has said publicly that Nolan's friends did not call her like that under normal circumstances. That call was the signal. She opened a location-sharing app on her phone and searched for her son. What she found was not Nolan, it was his phone, stationary on the mainland, inside a friend's residence. His keys were there too, both had made it back from the island. Nolan had not. Christine called the Coast Guard herself. Warren Hudson placed a separate call around the same time. The Coast Guard's response was that based on how the situation was described, it did not meet the threshold for immediate deployment. No boat went out, no aircraft went up. The call was logged and the line went quiet. What followed was hours of Christine making calls, hitting walls, and being passed between agencies over a jurisdictional question that had no clean answer. Horn Island sits in the Mississippi Sound. Which agency held authority over a missing person case that originated there was not something any single department could answer quickly. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office eventually agreed to open a formal report. Christine and Elmore drove to meet a deputy in a McDonald's parking lot late that night, told him everything they knew. By then, Nolan had been missing for hours. The clock was still running. If this case stayed with you, if that image of Christine searching for her son's phone and finding it miles away from him is still sitting in the back of your mind, then you already know what you need to do next. Subscribe. Not for us, for him, for every victim who never got to tell their own story. Elmore Wansley did not wait for a command post. On the morning of July 5th, while agencies were still working out coordination on shore, Nolan's father took his own boat out and went looking for his son himself. That is the image that stays with you from this part of the story. A father on open water searching alone, while the machinery of an official response was still assembling behind him. That response did come together. A command post was established at the Lake Mars boat launch in Ocean Springs. The search pulled in the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service of Gulf Islands National Seashore, the United States Coast Guard, and the United Cajun Navy. Josh Gill, the United Cajun Navy's incident commander, confirmed his organization received a direct call from Christine and moved immediately. Boats, drones, and personnel deployed within hours of that contact. Brian Trasher, the organization's national vice president, spoke publicly about the conditions on that stretch of the island. He noted the rip current running along the northwestern end of Horn Island is strong enough to put even capable swimmers in serious difficulty. He also raised a question that no one has fully answered. With hundreds of people spread across that beach on the afternoon of July 4th, the fact that not a single person has come forward to say they witnessed anyone in distress is something investigators and the family have both noted. On the afternoon of July 5th, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources launched drone flights to survey the western side of Horn Island. The heat that day was significant enough to cause the drone batteries to swell. The flights were cut short. The search returned nothing. Early on the morning of July 6th, at approximately 8:45 a.m., a National Park Service ranger spotted a body in the water near the island's northwestern shore. Sheriff John Ledbetter confirmed it matched the description that had been circulated for Nolan Wells. The following day, July 7th, Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed identification through dental records. He also confirmed to CNN that the swimsuit recovered on the body matched the one Nolan had been photographed wearing on July 4th. The search was over. Nolan Xavier Wells had been found. What nobody could tell his family yet, and what nobody can confirm to this day, is exactly how he ended up in that water. For weeks, the most important witness in this case was also the most absent one. Katie McCormack, 19 years old, publicly identified as the young woman Nolan Wells was speaking with in his final confirmed minutes on Horn Island. She was there, she talked to him, and by every account available, she was the last person outside of Nolan's immediate friend group to interact with him before he disappeared. That made her account one of the most sought-after details in the entire investigation. It also made her one of the most misrepresented figures in the public conversation around it. For the first several weeks after Nolan's body was found, everything attributed to Katie arrived through someone else. First, through a family friend relaying what she claimed to have heard second-hand. Then through Katie's own mother and sister posting on Facebook in an attempt to correct rumors that had already spread far beyond their control. Each of those accounts was filtered, understandably, through another person's memory of what Katie had said, rather than coming directly from Katie herself. Then Christine sat down with her face-to-face. According to Christine, what Katie told her in that direct meeting did not line up with the version of events she had been hearing from other people. Christine said this publicly. She did not elaborate on every detail of that conversation, but the fact that she characterized it as inconsistent with what she had otherwise been told is significant on its own. The most detailed on-record account of Katie's actual position came from her sister Gracie McCormack, who spoke to the Daily Mail. According to Gracie, Katie's understanding at the time she left the island was that Nolan was heading back to the boat he had arrived on. She assumed, based on the conversation she and Nolan had, that his friends would not leave without him. Katie herself did not stay to watch him board. She left the island separately with her brother and his fiancée, who were part of a different group entirely from Nolan's. Gracie also pushed back on the version of events that had circulated online, the one where Nolan made a deliberate choice to stay on the island because he wanted to keep talking with Katie. That is not what Gracie described. Her account suggests Nolan believed he was walking back toward his own group, not making a decision to remain behind. That distinction is not a minor one. It shifts the entire frame of the question. The issue is not whether Nolan wanted to leave Horn Island that afternoon, based on what Katie told Christine and what Gracie told the Daily Mail he did. The issue is what happened between the moment he said goodbye to Katie and the moment that boat pulled away from the island without him. Katie McCormack herself has not spoken publicly as of this recording. What exists on record is Gracie's account and Christine's description of their meeting. Both are stated accounts from people with direct connections to the conversation, not confirmed testimony, not verified by investigators on the record. They are treated here as exactly what they are. That 90-minute window from Nolan's last confirmed sighting around 3 p.m. to the boat's GPS-documented departure at 4:31 p.m. is where this case lives. Everything that is unresolved, everything that is contested, everything that investigators are still trying to piece together points back to that gap. What happened on that beach in those 90 minutes is the question no one has answered yet. Now let's talk about the phone. When Nolan Wells was reported missing, his phone was not with him. It had made it back to the mainland. He had not. Christine already knew this from the location app search she ran the night of July 4th, the blue dot that placed Nolan's phone inside a friend's residence while her son was still unaccounted for on an island 10 miles offshore. What she did not know yet was what was on that phone. When she eventually accessed the device, both of Nolan's Snapchat accounts had been cleared. No saved photos, no saved videos. Nolan was, by all accounts, someone who documented gatherings like this one. The kind of person who had a record of the day on his phone because that is what 18-year-olds do at holiday events with their friends. The content that should have been there was not. And under Snapchat's normal operating window, content typically remains retrievable for up to 24 hours. That window had not closed when Christine accessed the phone. Some text messages also appeared to be missing. None of that on its own is proof that anyone tampered with the device. People clear phones for reasons that have nothing to do with a crime. What it does is establish a question that needs a forensic answer, not a social media verdict. And forensic extraction can recover data from a device long after a user believes it is permanently gone. Deleted does not mean destroyed, not when the right tools are applied. Sheriff John Ledbetter's office stated it never had physical possession of the phone and formally requested it for forensic examination. The family's investigators examined the device first. Following the July 15th meeting between Christine and Elmore Wansley and District Attorney Angel Myers McGrath, both sides reached an agreement that legal analysts described as highly unusual. A joint simultaneous phone inspection, where the family's forensic experts and law enforcement examine the device at the same time, pulling data the same way, so that neither side can later dispute what the other found or how they found it. That arrangement does not happen without sustained pressure. It reflects both how far trust had eroded between this family and local investigators, and a genuine move by de McGrath's office to close that gap. If you want to see this through to the end, if you want to be part of the community that made sure this case didn't go cold, if you believe Nolan Wells deserves more than just another news cycle, there's one thing you can do: subscribe. Not because this channel wants your subscription, but because these stories don't get told without people like you caring. Because the algorithm rewards attention, and attention leads to answers. Every subscription is a promise that we will keep digging, that we will not let these cases go cold again. Then there is the video. In the early days of the investigation, attorney Ben Crump referenced a short clip that had been circulating in which a voice could be heard demanding a phone back. Crump's team indicated they believed the voice belonged to Nolan. That claim moved through the internet at speed and was treated as confirmed fact within hours of being mentioned. It was not confirmed. Traston Shepard, one of Nolan's friends, came forward publicly to ABC News and stated the voice on that video was his own, from a separate, unrelated altercation he was involved in that day, and that Nolan was nearby in the water but not visible anywhere in the footage. When a reporter pressed Crump on this directly at a later press conference, his response was noticeably more careful than his earlier statements had been. He acknowledged the original claim came from a single witness, that a second witness had since disputed it, and that his team now has audio experts working to determine whose voice is actually captured on the recording. He also committed going forward to presenting single witness claims as exactly that. That is a correction on the record from the family's own attorney, and it is stated here once. Traston Shepard addressed the phone separation in that same ABC News interview. He said everyone in the group left their phones on the boat that day to keep them away from salt water and splashing, and that when he chose not to go in the water, he placed his own phone on the boat's dashboard alongside around 15 others from the rest of the group. He also said plainly that the reason Nolan stayed on the island was that he had met a girl and planned to catch a ride back to the mainland on a different boat later. Christine and Elmore Wansley, through Ben Crump, responded to Shepard's account without hostility. They said they had never personally met him and were not in a position to discount what he remembered. They said they welcomed every account from every person who was on that island, because what they are looking for before anything else is the truth. Let's talk about the autopsies. The state of Mississippi performed its autopsy on Nolan Wells on July 7th, one day after his body was recovered from the water near Horn Island's northwestern shore. That examination was carried out at the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office. As of this recording, the results have not been released to the public. That is not an oversight, it is deliberate. Mississippi Department of Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tindell confirmed publicly that the state autopsy report will be withheld until a grand jury has had the opportunity to review it, at which point it transfers to District Attorney Angel Myers McRath's office. A preliminary assessment indicated no initial evidence of drug or alcohol involvement, but officials were careful to frame that as preliminary. Toxicology results take time. The full picture is not yet available. No official cause of death, no official manner of death. The state's findings remain sealed. That left the family with one option if they wanted answers on their own timeline. They commissioned an independent autopsy. The examination was performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell, president of the National Medical Association, former chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C., a man with the credentials and experience to conduct exactly this kind of review. The cost was covered in part by Colin Kaepernick, whose contribution to the family's independent investigation extended beyond public statements. The preliminary findings were announced on July 22nd at the 117th NAACP National Convention in Chicago. Christine and Elmore Wansley stood alongside Ben Crump as those results were made public. The finding, cause and manner of death undetermined. Pending further investigation, foul play could not be ruled out. Two details from Dr. Mitchell's preliminary report carry specific weight. The first involves what he did not receive. When Dr. Mitchell conducted his examination, Nolan's internal neck structures, including his trachea, were not provided to him. They had been retained by the initial state pathologist. Dr. Mitchell stated he did not know the reason for that retention, but he and medical experts who spoke to ABC News acknowledged that pathologists do sometimes retain tissue for additional testing, particularly when there are questions about fracture or compression in that area. It is a recognized practice. It is also a gap in what the independent examination could fully assess. Ben Crump publicly demanded that the Mississippi Medical Examiner's Office provide Dr. Mitchell with its photographs and observations from the original examination, so the independent review could be as complete as possible. As of this recording, that request had not been confirmed as fulfilled. The second detail is the context Dr. Mitchell placed around the circumstances of the death itself, specifically the significance of it occurring in or near water. Considered alongside Nolan's documented physical condition as a trained collegiate athlete, Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind offered his own perspective to CNN, that the current running along the northwestern end of Horn Island is genuinely strong, and that the area carries a documented history of drowning incidents that predate this case entirely. Brian Trasher of the United Cajun Navy echoed that assessment, noting the current in that specific stretch is capable of overwhelming even strong swimmers. He also returned to the same question he raised during the search, that, with the number of people present on that beach on July 4th, the complete absence of anyone coming forward to say they saw a person in distress in the water that afternoon remains something investigators and the family have not been able to explain. 2 autopsies, 2 separate laboratories working from the same body. As of this recording, neither has produced a confirmed cause of death. The most important forensic question in this entire case remains officially unanswered. Now let's talk about the grand jury. On July 15th, 11 days after Nolan Wells did not come home from Horn Island, his parents sat across a table from the Jackson County District Attorney for the first time since their son's body had been recovered. Christine and Elmore Wansley walked into that meeting with attorney Ben Crump, attorney Eric Hirsch, who has been leading the family's independent investigative effort, and attorney Liza Park. What they walked out with were 2 concrete commitments. First, once the Jackson County Sheriff's Office concludes its investigation, the case will be presented to a grand jury. Second, Both sides agreed to the joint simultaneous phone inspection. The grand jury announcement traveled fast online and was almost immediately misread by a large portion of the public following this case. A grand jury referral sounds like charges. It is not charges. In Jackson County, presenting an unnatural or suspicious death to a grand jury is standard procedure. It happens routinely, it does not require evidence of a crime, and it does not mean prosecutors believe one occurred. A grand jury is a panel of citizens, typically between 15 and 25 people in this jurisdiction, who review whatever evidence prosecutors choose to present and decide whether probable cause exists to move forward. There is no defense present. There is no public record of the proceedings. DA McRath's office stated directly in the aftermath of that July 15th meeting that this case is not currently being treated as a criminal investigation. Not everyone accepted that framing at face value. Former Mississippi Judge Carlos Moore went on record with his own concerns about District Attorney Angel Myers McRath, pointing specifically to a previous case involving a fatal police shooting where he says her office had substantial evidence and still did not secure an indictment. His position is direct. A grand jury referral from this office should not be mistaken for meaningful forward momentum until the results prove otherwise. He said he intends to watch this case closely. Attorney Tyler Bailey offered a different perspective. He explained that the referral is procedurally routine, and that even if charges did eventually emerge from the grand jury process, they would not necessarily point toward homicide. Without a confirmed cause of death, the more likely territory for any charges would involve the aftermath. Obstruction of justice, accessory after the fact, or related offenses tied to how the hours following Nolan's disappearance were handled rather than the disappearance itself. Eric Hirsch added a detail at that same press conference that put the scale of public interest in this case into concrete terms. His team is receiving between 50 and 100 calls every single day from people claiming they were on Horn Island on July 4th or know someone who was. That volume of potential witnesses is significant. What investigators do with those contacts will matter. Hirsch also raised a specific legal complaint that had nothing to do with theories or speculation. Under Mississippi law, immediate family members in a death case are entitled to receive an incident report within 72 hours. That window had expired long before the July 15th meeting. The family still had not received the report. Christine added her own detail. The last time anyone from the sheriff's department had contacted the family before that meeting was the prior Tuesday. And that contact did not come from the sheriff's office. It came from Christine, who sent a text message asking for an update on her own son's death investigation. Following the meeting, DA McRath's office agreed to assign a dedicated victim advocate as the family's primary point of contact going forward. The office acknowledged the communication gap. That acknowledgement came only because the family's legal team put it on the table in that room. On the same day Nolan was laid to rest, Christine Wansley filed a petition in Jackson County Chancery Court to open her son's estate and serve as its administrator. The estate's assets, as described in the filing, would consist solely of claims for damages arising from the circumstances of Nolan's death. That filing is a legal door being held open. Whatever the criminal process does or does not produce, it ensures the family retains the right to pursue civil accountability. It is one of the most significant legal moves in this entire case, and it received a fraction of the attention it deserved. On Monday, the 20th of July 2026, 16 days after Nolan Wells did not come home from Horn Island, his family laid him to rest at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Visitation opened at 9 a.m. and ran through 11. The service followed immediately after. Christine had been clear beforehand about what she wanted the day to feel like. She said Nolan would not want people sitting around crying. She wanted a celebration, something that reflected who her son actually was rather than only the circumstances of how he was lost. After the service, a celebration of life was held at the Jackson County Fairgrounds. It was open not just to immediate family, but to former teammates from every level of Nolan's football career. Coaches, classmates, media. Christine reached out personally to Coach Les George to make sure players who had known Nolan from middle school through his time at Southwest Mississippi Community College were there and represented. Reverend A.I. Sharpton officiated at the family's request. Tyler Perry covered the full cost of the funeral. The service was live-streamed in full, a deliberate choice by Christine to open what is normally one of the most private moments a family endures to the national audience that had been following this case. Before the service ended, Christine spoke directly to Nolan's friends. The same young people whose accounts of July 4th sit at the center of so many unresolved questions. She asked them to take care of their mental health. She acknowledged they were carrying weight of their own. In the middle of a legal fight for answers about her son's death, she made space for that. That is worth noting. Before we close this file, here is where things actually stand. Not what social media says, not what any single account claims, what is confirmed, what is pending, and what remains entirely open. Stated plainly without inflation. Confirmed. GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources documents the boat's full movements on July 4th. From the 9:56 a.m. departure through the 4:31 p.m. exit from Horn Island and the 5:44 p.m. return to the mainland dock. The bilge pump failure is independently corroborated by real-time dispatch audio, recorded hours before anyone knew Nolan would not be coming home. Nolan's body was formally identified through dental records on July 7th by Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind. The independent autopsy conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell returned a preliminary finding of cause and manner of death undetermined, with foul play explicitly not ruled out. The case is heading to a grand jury once the Jackson County Sheriff's Office concludes its investigation. Both the family's forensic team and law enforcement have agreed to a joint simultaneous inspection of Nolan's phone. The FBI's Jackson Field Office has confirmed its role supporting the Sheriff's Office and specifically addressing interstate threats connected to the case. Katie McCormack met with Christine Wansley directly, face-to-face. Christine filed a petition in Jackson County Chancery Court to open Nolan's estate and preserve the family's right to pursue civil action. A California man was arrested on July 30th for allegedly sending death threats to Judge Ashley Cole. Pending. The state autopsy report remains sealed and will not be released publicly until after a grand jury reviews it. Final toxicology results have not been issued. The joint forensic phone inspection has not yet been completed. The grand jury has not convened. Dr. Roger Mitchell has not yet received Nolan's internal neck structures or the state medical examiner's photographs and observations from the original examination, both of which Ben Crump has publicly requested to allow a more complete independent review, unresolved. Why Nolan was not on that boat when it left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m., what happened during the 90-minute window between his last confirmed sighting around 3:00 p.m. and the boat's departure, whose voice is captured on the disputed video. Still being reviewed by audio experts with no confirmed answer. What the phone forensics will reveal once the joint inspection is completed. Whether the state autopsy and the independent autopsy will align or produce conflicting conclusions, and what either outcome means for the direction of this investigation going forward. No cause of death has been officially confirmed. No individual has been named a suspect. No charges have been filed in connection with the death of Nolan Xavier Wells. You stayed until the end. You heard Nolan's name. You heard his mother's story. You heard the frustration. You felt the injustice. Now do the only thing that makes sense. Subscribe, because he deserves to be remembered. And we can't do that without you. The only way stories like this continue to be told is if people like you choose to care, choose to stay, choose to be part of the community that won't let go. So here's what I'm asking, and I'm not asking lightly. If this case stayed with you, if that 90-minute gap is still eating at you, if you believe Nolan Wells deserves justice, subscribe, share this video, drop a comment, tell us which moments stopped you cold, Katie's account, the GPS data, the missing neck structures, the mother filing in court just to get access to her own son's records. The 90 minutes that nobody can explain. We read every single one. We want to know where you're watching from. And until next time, the truth is patient, and so are we. We'll see you in the next one. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He went to Horn Island on the 4th of July 2026 for a holiday weekend with his friends. He had 2 days before summer training camp. He had a season ahead of him. He did not come home. And the people who love him are still standing in the same place they were that night in the McDonald's parking lot, asking the same question, waiting for an answer that has not come. Unsolved files will be here when it does. The state autopsy results, the phone forensic findings, the grand jury process, all moving toward conclusions that will define where this case goes next. And when any one of those breaks, this channel will have the full breakdown before the story has time to get distorted. Subscribe right now so you are not catching up after the fact. This is the most consequential phase this case has entered since Nolan's body was recovered.